Okay, so we finished the part of the mimer here in Heichaltzu in chapter 12, where he describes how a person davens, and in davening he meditates on the greatness of Hashem and how everything is amazing regarding the way Hashem creates the world, something which is beyond human comprehension. And that is because the creation of the world is yesh miyayin. And he goes into the details that there are 2 points about yesh miyayin that bring that inspiration, that we understand, that we don't understand, that this is something which is beyond human comprehension. Number one, because there's no such thing as yesh miyayin in the human experience. We have nothing to compare it to. We have nothing to identify it with. And number two is that the very process of yesh miyayin is a paradox in itself. And they went through the differences between Yilva and yesh miyayin. So if you can look at the workbook that I gave you, you don't have one more X1 here. Yeah,
I do actually.
Look at page 75. On page 75 in the workbook, just a little breaking it down a little more clearly. So we have the difference between yesh miyayin and iluv, A, B, C, and D. So the first thing is that the yesh does not exist in the source, which means it doesn't exist in the ayin, even potentially. Thank you very much. Even potentially, it doesn't exist. Iluv means, or yesh miyesh, is where the olul exists potentially in the source. That's one difference. Second difference is, so basically what this is saying is that yesh miyayin is a real creation. It's a creation in an absolute way, but iluv is not a creation in an absolute way because it already existed before it was created. So then what is it? It's just revealing it from its potential state to an actual state. But in potential, it already existed. Number two, when the yesh, I'm looking at page 75 in the workbook. Good morning, welcome back. Page 75 in the workbook, when the yesh is created, it is new in an absolute way because it didn't exist before. When the ol is created, it is not totally new, rather something that was already in existence, potentially inside the source. So that's number two. After number one, we want to understand that yesh is really new. And iluv, even though we didn't see it before, but it's not in essence new. And that leads us to the next thing, to number three. The process of creation, yesh miyayin, requires that the source, which is the ayin, distances itself, conceals itself from the yesh. Because if the infinite would be revealed and exposed, then there's no room, no space for something which is finite. Finite cannot exist in an infinite realm. So the only way that this yesh, which is finite, can be created to exist is if the ayin distance itself, not distance itself in geographic location, meaning it conceals itself as if it doesn't exist, and that allows the yesh to exist. In the case of iluv, the process of creation requires the opposite, that the ilah applies itself, reveals itself, and connects itself to the ol, and then it could be reduced. Like the intellect and the emotion. The more the intellect is applied to the emotion, the more successful the process will be producing the emotion. And the same with the more the teacher applies himself to the student, the more successful the teacher will be to transmit and communicate what he has in his head to the student. And the more the builder will apply himself to the building that is building, the better the builder will be, and everything else, which is iluv. The fourth point is that the yesh cannot exist without, because it's absolutely new, because of number B, because of B, that's why we have D, that the yesh cannot exist without the constant support of the ayin that sustains it, not even for one moment. because it's totally new. And something which is totally new needs the creative force to sustain it constantly, because it doesn't have any substance of its own. However, the Ilava'alu, once it's produced, it can continue to exist independently without the support of its source. And the reason is because it has its own independent identity. It was just hidden, but it has its own identity, and it's not totally dependent on the source. So the last two things, that was the part that he said in the Maimer, makes the whole idea of Ilava'alu, of Yesh Me'ayin, so amazing and so much inconceivable to human comprehension, because it's a paradox. The ayin has to be as close as possible to the yesh in order for it to exist. The ayin has to be as far as possible from the yesh in order for it to exist. And both things are happening at the same time. So that was just brought in as an example of what the person is being mizbeina, what he's meditating on. And now we're going to page 95. In Lessons in Heichaltzu, page 95, where the last paragraph at the bottom, and now he's introducing another thing that he could be meditating on. This is a little bit simpler. Or for example, another meditation that will bring a person to daven with great simcha, with joy and excitement. Just to contemplate on the greatness of Hashem, and how Hashem is exalted, and Hashem is infinite, and that His greatness is, again, unfathomable. It's beyond human comprehension. We're not talking now about the process of creation, just Hashem Himself is infinite, beyond comprehension. And again, how could you understand infinite? He was once a chassid that he taught chassidus. He had one student who was very bright, a genius. And I guess he saw that this student is very smart, very bright, but a little bit too much confidence in himself and his understanding. So he asked him a question. And he said to him, I want you to describe infinity to me. He said, can I describe infinity? Infinity is infinity. No, but you should be able to do it anyway. He finally got him to start. And he says, well, infinity is, he said, okay, stop right there. As soon as you say is, you're already off. You can't say what it is. There's no way of saying what it is. You don't have to go any further. You cannot say that. So then what does it mean we understand how infinite Hashem is? Generally speaking, the answer is our understanding is more in the finite. The more we understand how amazing the finite is, and then we say that Hashem is infinitely greater than that, the more we understand how Hashem is infinite. Should I make that simpler? I make it simpler. Imagine you have 10 people in a room. Each one is a rabbi, a sage, very learned, great Torah scholar, and you point to one person and say, this person is much greater than all the other people in the room. Wow, that's amazing. They're all scholars, and they're all rabbis, but this one is much greater. We have an example of this in Pirkei Avos. In Pirkei Avos, it says Rabbi Yochanan had 5 students, and he gives their names. And then he said, if you put 4 of these students, they were the greatest students. They were the ones who spread Torah in his generation. He had thousands, tens of thousands of students, but they were the prime students, the major students. And from them, Torah spread to the whole world. This was Rabbi Yochanan Zakkai. So this was after the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash, where everything was destroyed and they had to rebuild Torah again. And he said that these 4 great giants and pillars of Torah and pillars of Judaism, if we would put them on a scale on one side and put the other rabbi on the other scale, he alone would outweigh all 4. There's a difference in opinion which one it was, but this idea So if I tell you this guy, this rabbi, this sage is so great in his knowledge of Torah, in his piety and everything, that he outweighs all four. That is amazing, right? But what if you start elaborating on the greatness of the four people? And you say, for example, this person, he knows the entire Shas by heart. Just say one word, he'll read the rest of you. Any Gemara you pick, which is a few 100,000, not 100,000, but tens of thousands of pages. Not only Gemara, but also with Rashi. Not only Rashi, but also Tosfos. He can just recite everything. Wow. So what's the other one? Other one's greater than him. How is he greater? He can do it forwards and backwards. My grandfather once told me that he knew someone who knew the Torah Chesed. Torah Chesed was the Chassid of the Tzemach Tzedek, and he was a brilliant genius and brilliant Torah scholar in Nigla, in the revealed part of Torah. And the Torah Chesed, who knew the entire Mishnayos forward and backward. He was known that he could just read it backwards. So he said to him, listen, how do you do this? For example, me, I know Ashrei by heart. You wake me up in the middle of the night and you say, Posei Chas Yodecha, I'll continue the pasuk. I know the whole Ashrei, but to say it backwards, I break my teeth. How do you do that? So he said, if the siddur is open, could you read it backwards? Oh, the siddur is open, yeah, I could just read the word backwards. So he said, well, Baruch Hashem, when I learn something, it's right in front of my eyes and I can read it forward and I can read it backwards. Wow, okay, now we know two people. What's the third one? What could be greater than that? Then you have to describe that this person is so much greater than both of them because he's this and this and this and this. And the fourth person is this and this and this. And you keep talking about each one. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You come up to the ninth person, you can't even catch your breath anymore. Then you say, and this 10th person, he's equivalent to all 9 put together. And you didn't add anything about what's his greatness, but just that alone, after describing the greatness of each one of the 9, now when I say that he's greater than all these 9, it just has much more meaning to it. Is that understood? There's a word for it in Chassidus. It's called Yedias Hashliva, knowing something by negating it. Ever heard that term? Yedias Hashliva means I don't really know it, but by the fact that I'm saying it's not A, B, C, D, E, F, G, that makes me understand how awesome and how great this is. So our understanding is more in the levels that we could understand. So we learn about Atzilus, we learn about Bria, Yitzira, Asiya, Malachim, angels, souls. We learn about things that we could comprehend to some degree because it belongs to the finite realm. And we learn, that there are deeper levels and higher levels in every which way. And then after that, when we say that Hashem is infinite and is infinitely greater than that, it has so much more meaning. So what he's saying here is that he's meditating just on how Hashem is infinite. How can you meditate if it's infinite? It's infinite. We're meditating more on the finite, but for the purpose to understand what it means when we say that Hashem is infinite, much infinitely greater than all these other finite levels. Page 96. There's godliness. And one thinks very deeply into this concept, meditating on it. Until he grasps it and he comprehends it. It really gets it penetrates into his brain and it's grasped by the brain. And here the Rebbe repeats it in Yiddish. There are certain things which were in the Maimer, very few times we find this, but in the Maimer, they repeat it in Yiddish because being that is the language that we speak on a daily basis, it penetrates deeper. The Reichkeit von Elokus is made benafshe. The richness of godliness shines in a revealed manner within the soul. So we know that even though we say that when you think about something, it's going to get you excited, but it's only if you think in a certain way. First of all, you have to think about it in a deep way. Superficially, if you think about things superficially, it's not going to get you very far, especially when we're talking about things that are ruchnis. When you think superficially about the cakes you see in the window of the bakery, it might work right away without a lot of meditation. You don't have to meditate. This is chocolate coming from the right side, and this is chocolate coming from the left side, and there is this and this. That's your favorite. It's a natural reflex. You see it, and it goes. But especially ruchnius or anything else that's more distant from me, more foreign to me, in order for it to affect me emotionally, I can't just think about it superficially or like a fleeting thought. I have to really invest my brain into it, think about it deeply, get to you in a second. And not only that, especially if it's something which is more abstract, I have to think about it and digest it and bring it out into such words that it really becomes accepted and it settles in my brain, just like I understand Gashmias. And then it'll have an effect on my emotions. Yeah.
Is it that when you're thinking about all the Gashmias Hashem has provided for you and you're thinking about it all on a Gashmiastic level, that it's easier to understand, that it's easier to be like, oh, thank you, Hashem.
Yes, 100%, because it's closer to me. The reason why spiritual things don't affect us in the same way, because it's distant from our reality. I believe in it, I know it, but somehow it's not the same reality that's something that I see in front of my eyes. So like you just said, one of the things that also makes a person excited is when you think about Hashgacha Pratis, which means I pay attention, that I was looking forward to get this or that, and things weren't working out, and suddenly this happened, that happened, it was a chain of events, and Baruch Hashem, now I have this thing that I was looking forward to, and I recognize it as from Hashem. It's much easier to get excited because this is Gashmias, it's close to me, so it affects me. And something which is distant for me affects me less. So just like you have a light shining right over your head, it makes everything very bright. But if the light is a few 100 feet away, it's not going to give me so much light. It's too far from me. So that's why we need, especially with Ruchnis, we need to think about it. But also, it's like eating in a sense. You know, you have to chew the food that you eat in order to really digest it. What does digesting mean? That will really become part of my system. And the same thing with the brain. The brain has to digest the concept. And the digesting is by breaking it down into details and really understanding the details. And then I'll be able to digest it in my brain and absorb it. And once I absorb it and I become one with it, then it'll affect me emotionally. So the person gets excited. I mean, he uses the term, the richness of godliness. I don't know, in Yiddish, it really rings very differently. I don't know how it rings in English. But it means it's something which, when the person realizes how I'm not talking about how awesome Hashem is. Usually the feel, when you think about how awesome Hashem is, that should bring more feeling of fear. I don't mean fear that you're afraid of it, but when you see something awesome, it just makes you feel small. It makes you feel like nothing. You stand in front of a huge valley, a huge mountain, a huge ocean. The feeling is like, we will use the term fear. You're not afraid something's going to happen. It just makes you feel small. When you think about how amazing something is, how beautiful it is, how rich it is in its beauty and its content, that makes a person feel simcha and excited. As Yisrael benafshem me'od, will be very excited. This is the joy of Hashem who created us. And when the Yidbag Nafshe Balakus, this will cause his soul to cling to Hashem, the Dveika, B'chasheka, V'nefesh Shekeka, that he'll have a yearning and a desire and a thirst for Hashem. Not just daven, learn, do mitzvahs, but he'll feel inside him a burning desire to connect to Hashem. But so what was explained in this part of the Maimer, in general, this would be the Avodah, serving Hashem with love. So even though we're talking about joy and simcha, but it's all in the same category. It's about loving Hashem. The clinging to Hashem, attaching myself to Hashem, and rejoicing with Hashem And that goes together. Someone who loves another person, when they see that person and they have the opportunity to be with that person, they will be rejoicing because of the fact that I love this person. So when I love Hashem, it also brings me simcha, that I'm able to bond with Hashem, able to embrace Hashem, and that makes me happy. So simcha and love, it all comes together, and it all comes as a result of thinking into the greatness of Hashem. Page 97, we have the kitzur, the summary, what he just said. Avodah b'simcha, the avodah of serving Hashem with joy is a result of his banus b'gdulas havaya, meditating on the greatness of Hashem. In two ways, either mitzad atzmei, just the greatness of Hashem in general, how Hashem is infinite, or mitzad abriya. It's like sometimes it says if a person is beinan the greatness of Hashem and Hashem is infinite, just to think of the idea of hashgacha pratis. I'm not talking about how it affects me. The idea that Hashem is aware and knows everything that's happening in the world. Let's stop and think about what that means for a second. There's supposed to be about 8 billion people in the world, I think. Hashem knows what every person is doing, what every person is thinking, every nuance. Not only knows, he's the one who's responsible to make it happen. He sustains them. Without that, it couldn't happen. So I know Hashem knows what one of the billion people in China is doing, and one of the billion people in India is doing, and in all the other countries in the world at the same time. In addition to that, he knows every single animal, every single bird, every single fish, where it is and what it's doing. In addition to that, we learned the mimer, you probably remember the beginning of the year, he knows what every blade of grass in the world is doing. The more you think about it, you get a little bit of an understanding. What does it mean infinite? There's just no way that human beings could comprehend something like that. So this is when we think about how infinite Hashem is, or we think about the creation. Yesh me'ayin, mechayev shubein hareich. Yesh me'ayin dictates. If it's yesh me'ayin, it has to be incomparable, which means that the source has to be very distant from the creation. And at the same time, the creating force has to be constantly in the creation. And that's something which is a paradox. And that can only be because Hashem is infinite. So these are the things that create the feeling of simcha and love to Hashem. So we didn't yet relate it to the part in the Maimon, which is about Midyan and Avaschin. It's just describing now one scenario, one kind of a person davening in a way that brings simcha. Now we go to Ofen Abay, the second. Even though this one is much simpler, but in some ways it's more confusing, we'll have to try to explain that. This is just, by the way, I brought this up. We probably have a few more in the library. I don't know if you know what this is, but we're counting Sphira now every day. And after we finish this, we're going to learn a minor about Sphira, the Hasidus. The general idea is that when you count Sphira, it's about self-refinement, refining of the character traits. So we have 7 weeks. Each week has 7 days, and each week is dedicated to refine another character trait. What are the 7 days? Because each character trait has 7 parts. So Rabbi Simon Jacobson put this together. Oops. Oh. What? Anybody speak French here? Yeah. This one's in French. Sorry. Let me see this one. Oh, this is English. So I'll take this back. So basically, he explains in practical terms what is chesed shebechesed, what is gvur shebechesed, what is tefer shebechesed. Again, we'll be learning a mimer, but the mimer, together with this, it'll really complement the mimer. But if anybody wants to have a look at it, I'm leaving it on the table here. And I think we should have more in the library. In English, yeah. So we have a little bit of time. We're going to start the second type of person that davens. That's Yud Gimel. When we finish Yud Gimel, we'll go back to the workbook. Boif and Habay, the second kind of way of avodah, Ubebchinas, shiftless dafka, in this marirus arichuke, where a person stimulates feelings of humility and bitterness because of one's distance from Hashem. So here we have there's a thin line that divides between sadness and depression, which is something which is outlawed in Chassidus, totally outlawed, the worst thing that we can possibly experience. And Chassidus, depression is considered the threshold of all evil. And yet at the same time, it talks about bitterness from being far from Hashem. So we're going to need to explain that. What's this? It's a very subtle thing, but it's a huge difference. And of course, if he's talking about this in a mimer, that this is a way of davening, obviously it's a positive thing, not negative. The person who is a master of accounts. What kind of expression is that? Simply, it means just like you say, a person masters certain things. A person masters the skill of making an account, which means most people, the way they live their lives is they just take it from day to day and keep moving. But in reality, we should really stop and catch our breath and think a little bit about where am I going? What have I accomplished? What have I achieved? And it's not just about what, but where am I holding? What do I need to do? What have I, what have I already sort of taken care of, and what do I need to take care of now? Which means just like in running a business. When a person runs a business, you can't just run a business without stopping and thinking, is your business a profit? Is it a loss? If it is a profit, where is it coming from? And what should I focus on to make it more of a profit? If it's a loss, what do I need to focus on that it shouldn't be a loss? You have to take inventory. What do I have? What I don't have? What do I need? Same thing as Baruchnis. So Mori de Chushma means the person who masters the skill of making an account, Baruchnius. He thinks about the details of his thoughts, his speech, and his actions that are not directed to Hashem. In other words, thinking about those things that are negative that need to be corrected. It says, I'm not talking about by doing something which is an avera, like an act which is an avera. Even the things that are permissible. Okay, don't get scared. We're talking about a person's on a higher level of serving Hashem. So this person is at a place where he's not basically violating Torah, at least not in the way that he's aware of it. But he's thinking about, are my thoughts always directed towards Hashem? Or they're not Shem Shemayim, Shem Gam Kinra, where it's explained in Tanya that anything which is not directed to Hashem is also klipa. It's a different kind of klipa. It's called klipa snoiga. It's a lighter klipa, but it's also klipa. And for this person, the fact that it's klipa is something which is a defect. And the same thing is with the positive end. If he thinks about the good things that he does, which are good, again, we're looking to improve things. The key in my Torah mitzvahs, am I doing the Torah mitzvahs the proper way? In other words, I'm doing it. I'm giving tzedakah. I'm davening every day. I'm putting on tefillin. I put up a mezuzah. I eat matzah. But am I doing it the way it's really supposed to be done? You do as it's known. The whole mitzvah yesh ba kavana pratis ba'avodah. Every mitzvah has a specific purpose in the person's divine service, which means really there are two parts to mitzvahs. And here he goes into the second part. There's one part to a mitzvah where it's really irrelevant what it accomplishes within my soul, what it accomplishes spiritually. It's irrelevant. Hashem said to put on tefillin, I put on tefillin. Hashem said to put up a mezuzah, I put up a mezuzah. So the reason why I'm doing it and what the motive behind it is just to follow what Hashem said, and that's the way I am connected to Hashem. In fact, that's why we find that every mitzvah, even though you make a different bracha, there's one part of the bracha which is the same. Baruch Ata Hashem, Elokeinu melech haolam, asher kitshanu b'mitzvah. So vitzivanu is the same for washing hands, the same for eating for eating matzah, it's the same for lulav and esrog, and the same for halal, and the same for candle lighting. That part is the same because there's an aspect in the mitzvah which is the same. Then there's another aspect to mitzvahs, and that is that there is something that it accomplishes spiritually in the person. Besides what it accomplishes in Shemayim, in the heavenly realm, it accomplished something with me. It has a certain effect in terms of the spiritual refinement, makes me a more refined person. And each mitzvah in a different way. There's no doubles or triples. Each mitzvah has a different purpose. For example, tefillin, name the Shabbat, Alev, Amayach. Tefillin, the purpose is to subjugate one's mind and heart, to direct the mind and the heart to Hashem. In other words, a man puts on tefillin, so one tefillin is on the arm over here, but even though it's on the arm, but it's supposed to be pointing to the heart. And the other tefillin is on the head. And what are we supposed to think when we do that? We're supposed to think, Hashem, I'm committing myself to serve you with my head and my heart. I'm dedicating my heart to serve you. I'm dedicating my head to serve you. Once the heart and the head are dedicated and directed in the right direction, then we can rest assured that the hands and the feet and the eyes and the nose and the mouth and the ears and all the other organs in the body will also go in the right direction. If the front car in the train is going in the right direction, you don't have to make each car separately. It's going to go along. And just in case anyone asks you, so why do you put it on the arm? Why don't you tie the tefillin on your heart like this? And if you'll tell me it looks weird on the arm, it also looks weird. So what's the difference? But the answer is because the heart alone is not a good. The heart in a way that it leads to action. That's why we put it on the arm. But we put it on the arm in a way that should point towards the heart. So that's what I should be thinking when I put on tefillin. What about a person who puts on tefillin and doesn't think? They're still doing the mitzvah. But it's like a body without a soul. There's a physical act, but there's no life to it. But when a person puts it on and thinks about dedicating my heart and my mind to Hashem, then that's the soul of the mitzvah. Then we have another mitzvah, Dalad Minim Shebelulav. In Sukkot, we have the lulav and the esrog, the hadasim, and the ravas. We change the kinnis avdus, that all these four species are bound together, and that's how I form the mitzvah. And that's about avdus. The esrog shetevis. In fact, the word esrog is an acronym. Aleph, Sof, Reish, Gimel. To a pasuk until where it says Al Tve'eni Regel Gaiva. Let not the foot of pride come against me. In other words, not that I should have no pride, I shouldn't even have the foot of pride. We need to say, just like in the human body, the foot is the lowest part of the body. So it's saying, Hashem, don't allow me to have any iota of pride. That means that this mitzvah is about unity and about getting rid of pride. So, of course, are the two connected or not?
Yeah.
That's what the whole Maimon is about. That Midyan, which is division, comes from Gaiva, from Yeshus, from pride. So it comes together. So this mitzvah is a mitzvah that's the time to focus on this idea of not having arrogance and therefore being able to connect to other people, tolerate other people, love other people, and so on. But then there's the other thing in mitzvahs, which you said before, which is a general kavanah, accepting the yoke of Hashem, accepting Hashem's sovereignty, that He's my king, and whatever He says, that's what I do. This is explained more in depth and in detail in chapter 41 and 42 and the Skoros La'el. These two chapters are outstanding chapters in the sense that they talk about this idea of Kabbalah serve, accepting the yoke of Hashem, idea of dedicating myself to Hashem unconditionally. It's these two prakim. In fact, it's interesting. Most shuls have a sign in the front of the shul, especially with the chazan of davening. What does the sign say? Anyone notice it? Unless you didn't daven in any other shul. But most shul have a sign that says the big word shivisi. I don't see anybody lighting up, so obviously never saw it. Shivisi, that's how the Shulchan Aruch begins with these words. Shivisi, it's a pasuk. Shivisi Hashem l'negdi summit. I put Hashem always in front of me. So as we're going to daven, you're davening to Hashem. So in front of the Amud, which means where the Chazan stands and leads the davening, with a big sign, with big word Shivisi underneath, it says, Shivisi Hashem, I put Hashem always in front of me. In the Lubavitcher Shul, they don't have it. I remember once in the Shul, when there was a person there that made such a racket about it, such a commotion. How come we don't have that sign? Like that's obviously we're not thinking about Hashem and all sorts of interesting things. I once heard one of the older Chassidim. They said the reason why we don't have a sign is because we learn Perek Mamalach and Beis and Tanya. And these two chapters are edged into our mind, and that's our Shavisi. We don't need a sign on the wall. We need to edge it in our mind and in our heart. Of course, we can say, if that's the case, why do we do this or do that? Yes, there are things we need to do, but this is something more internal. And sometimes, again, not chas v'sholom, every custom is a custom and it's a way of Torah, just a different path. That the focus is to, sometimes if you do something technical and external, it takes away from the drive to do it internally. So therefore, we don't have the sign, so I know that I have to drive that message internally to the point that I don't need to have a sign there, but it becomes part of me. And these are the two chapters, Mem Aleph and Mem Beis. What do you want to say? Who was asking the question?
What kind of shul is it in?
What?
The shul.
I think almost all shuls except Chabad. They're going to be different, Okay. So if a person doesn't do mitzvahs with these thoughts in mind, just does the mitzvah, he does it in a way which is cold, meaning there's no enthusiasm, there's no thought to it, there's no soul invested into it. There's a pasuk in Yeshayahu where he describes, he's rebuking the people that they do mitzvahs, and he uses this term, mitzvahs anoshim ulamada, which means they do the mitzvahs like a matter of habit. We're so used to it, so it's a habit. We put on tefillin, we daven, and the words just come out. So Baruch Hashem, I'm doing the mitzvah. You can't say, no matter what happens, no matter what I'm thinking, if I put on the tefillin, and if you put up the mezuzah, and I eat the matzah, I perform the mitzvah. But as I said before, it's a very poor performance because it's a body without a soul. And this is what the person's thinking about himself. What about a person who has kavanah? Then he's thinking, how much kavanah do I have? Am I really into it? Am I really deeply, investing my mind and my heart into the word that I'm saying? That's number one. So anyway, these are the thoughts that make the person feel, humility. Like I'm not really living up to the standards that I could. I really could do much better with davening and learning and the mitzvah that I do. But have the right things in mind, and it also makes the person feel that bitterness. Like the bitterness is not chas v'sholom. So let me just explain briefly, and not enough time, but let me just say one word, so at least you'll be able to fall asleep tonight. The difference between depression and bitterness is explained in Tanya, very famous chapter in Tanya. Where the Alter Rebbe explained the difference. There are 3 chapters on the subject, 27, 26, 27, 28. And the difference generally is that depression is an emotion that is lifeless. And it leads a person to inaction. That's the kind of feeling that leads a person to feel like, I don't want to do anything, I don't want to go out, I don't want to interact, I just want to give up, that kind of feeling. There is no life to it. Mariras, there's a lot of life to it, and the person feels driven, but they're driven by the fact that I'm missing out on doing what I need to be doing. In a way, you can say there's two ways that a person is driven to run somewhere. One way is that they heard about something amazing, something which is very enjoyable, something which is really very pleasurable. And when they heard about it, they want to go there and they're driven to go there. The other possibility is where a person is in a building that's on fire and they're driven to run to another place to run away from the fire. They're both driven and they're both running. And in fact, the guy who's running from the fire might even be running with more intensity because his adrenaline is all worked up. But this one is running away from fire, and this one is running towards something that's good. It's a different kind of emotion. So what he's talking about is the person in the first case scenario was running towards Hashem, feelings of love and joy and excitement. That's motivating him. This person is thinking more about what I'm lacking, and the place where I am is not the way I should be. So he's running away from that and trying to correct things. So it's a different, therefore, the feeling is a feeling of bitterness. Like I want to rise from this place where I am. And that's why it's a feeling of humility, because I realize how much I'm lacking. But again, it's a feeling that's full of life. It's a feeling that motivates me to do something, not chas v'shalom, just to be depressed and become a, what do they call it? A couch potato or something. The next piece is another step deeper into this meditation, to be continued. Okay. And someone asked me yesterday, so which way is better? And the answer is, it's not about good and bad. It's about personality. Some people, this is what makes them tick. And some people, that's what makes them tick. Everybody has a different kind of personality. Generally, it's probably connected to chesed and gvura, and that's what makes the difference. Okay, there to be continued tomorrow. So today, the same.